All right, welcome to episode 32 of Breaking Bio Podcast. I'm Morgan Jackson. I'm a PhD student at the University of Guelph in Ontario, Canada. And today we've got a whole suite of co-hosts joining us live from around the world, starting with Bug.
Oh, hi, I'm Bug Girl. I'm visiting you live from an undisclosed location in Ohio.
I don't know how I can follow an introduction like that, but I'm Stephen Hamblin, postdoc at the University of New South Wales in Sydney, Australia.
And today's special guest is Glendon Mellow.
I'm I guess an illustrator and fine artist, mostly doing paintings about evolutionary biology. And I write a blog on the Scientific American Network called Symbiotic. Twitter handle @Symbiotic.
Yeah, so Glendon, as he just said, is a fine artist and a SciComm artist. And I know this personally because Glendon was so kind as to work with me on a recent pub.
Woo!
And doing all sorts of SciComm drawings for it, which I'm going to totally pimp out right here as soon as I find the right page, which I should have bookmarked. But bam! There's a little piece of Glendon's work right there. A little jewel beetle illustration. So you do beetles, but what else do you do? So what are some of the things that you like to do the most, Glendon?
Well, my personal art blog is called The Flying Trilobite, and often a lot of the paintings I've done in the past have been oil paintings of winged trilobites on, I usually get pieces of shale or stone. That started when my wife found some old shale tiles in the annex area here in Toronto that were being thrown away, and grabbed them and was like, you should paint on these, so I did. So usually things to do with fossils. I also like painting things in microbiology, but I don't get asked to do that as often. And lately I've been asked to do a lot of science tattoos. So.
Cool. So you actually did Laylaps, totally spacing on his actual name.
Oh, Brian Svitek.
Brian. Yeah.
Yes. Sorry, Brian. So you've done a couple for him, right?
That's right. And I'm a little, well, more than a little bit late with the third. Sorry, Brian. But it's coming along. So.
Oh, hey, there we go.
That's
sweet.
Nice. Whoops.
So that's a Ceratosaurus.
Morgan, get your head out of there. Thank you.
In the death pose. And he's got another one as well. Let's see. Here it is. This is the first one Brian and I worked on.
Aww.
There we go.
Nice.
So those of you that are listening on the audio, we will provide links to those and on the breakingbio.com blog, and you can check them out for yourself on your leisure. This is the benefit of watching live and watching on YouTube. You get to see fun stuff.
There we go.
So
how did you get into tattoos? Like, was it just happenstance, or?
Yeah, it was really weird. This guy ran up to me and said, "Tattoo me if you want to live." No, I'm just kidding. Sorry, I was just so lame.
No, I'm pretty sure that's a Michael Bay movie.
Probably, yeah. No, I guess it just started because when I was designing my own tattoo, and then once I did that and then put it on my blog, then people started asking if I would design theirs as well. And I think the idea that I'd been doing some science illustrations, and even though a lot of them are sort of fanciful, by showing any scientific literacy, I think a lot of people. Most of the tattoos I've designed have been for people in the sciences, and I think that they'd rather trust somebody who is going to do the research and take the criticism if maybe I've missed something, and try to get it right, I think is the main thing. So I just kind of tripped into it, and I've had a lot more requests than I can actually handle to do lately. I'm not doing this full time anymore, so it's it's a definite challenge to fit it all in. So. Yeah, that's how the tattoos came about, I guess. It's you put up your own, and then other people say, "Can you do mine?" and that's it.
That's cool.
It's nice stuff.
It's not a very interesting story. Sorry.
No, it's
No, it is. Yeah.
just as interesting because it's from the non-artistic people like myself who would rely on somebody like you to do such things, like I have. But you do a lot of art for communicating science. So you do tattoos and stuff like that, which are, I guess, its own form of communicating science that people can take with them and use as props whenever they need to show off how an Albertosaurus dies. But you do a lot of advocacy for using art and using images and such for communicating science and ideas. How did you get so involved with that?
I guess it's a few different things. I mean, when I blogging on the Flying Trilobite, I've been blogging my own artwork for just over 6 years now, and some of it sort of started accidentally. Where, I think the best advice to any artist who wants to connect with people in the sciences is simply to start commenting on science blogs about things that they're actually interested in. Not in a trolly kind of a hand-wavy, oh, I do art as well in the comments, but just as a legitimate, you're interested in the topic and comment. The first contract I actually got that way after I started blogging was from Shelley Batts, who used to write a blog on scienceblogs.com called Retrospectacle. And I had just made a comment, I think it was on one of her posts about parrots. I used to have a parrot, and I made some comment on there, and like most bloggers, she clicked the link to see who I was, and then asked if I could redesign her blog banner. I'm not ashamed to say that it has lens flare. It has lens flare. So
it was lens flare before lens flare was
Yeah.
cool, though, right?
Yes.
That's right. Yeah.
So
So J.J. Abrams stole that from you?
Yes, he totally did.
I'm not saying anything, but so they would never hire a Canadian to direct Star Wars. That's all I'm saying. But yeah, so I think getting into the advocacy part of it was just after blogging about it for so long, there were so many good artists that are working in the sciences. Fine artists, there's people that are like hardcore scientific illustrators. And I started doing a series of posts called the Scumbles. Scumbling in painting is a term for sort of a loose brushwork that's just sort of glazes over the surface and adds a bit of color and texture. So the Scumbles were just my way of putting up a whole bunch of links to other people doing cool stuff in science communication visually. And because of those, and eventually when scienceblogging.org, do you know that big aggregate site of all the science blog networks? They asked me to create an RSS feed for that site that was all science-based artists, and they said, do you think there's enough that it would update, at least a couple of times a day or a few times a week? And yeah, I think it started out with about 60 blogs on it, and I think it's up over 170 now. It slowed down a bit because people aren't using feeds like that as much now, but yeah, it's because of those things, I got asked to be on Symbiotic with the Scientific American blog launch, and a lot of what we do is we try to show people, we use it as a way to show, here's some non-traditional imagery that might be really effective at getting people talking about your research. And sometimes it is traditional imagery. Of the three of us, I have a fine arts background. Calliope Manios, who launched the blog with me, she has she's a real scientific illustrator, geology major. She was the first person, I believe it was, to illustrate Tiktaalik, the fossil. She's illustrated Jerry Coyne and Neil Shubin's books, and then recently we brought in Katie McKissick, who does Beatrice Biology, which is a cartoon and comic site, and she also has helped with some apps. So she's got sort of a whole gaming side that she brings into our blog as well. So because of this, we sort of, between the three of us, we kind of find these really unusual images that people are making, and sometimes it's sculpture. We featured Willie Chur, who does he does these huge forms made out of balloons, and they're made out of hundreds of balloons, and they're gigantic installations, and they're always they have either like a deep sea feel or like a microbial feel to them, and they're not explicitly like, oh, it's this organism, but they're just fascinating to look at in terms of structures and things. So so there's a lot of different ways that I'd like to see people in science communication trying to adopt imagery that isn't isn't just a one-to-one. It isn't just like, okay, we need a picture of the fossil, here's the fossil. I mean, those are, of course, very, very useful, but at the same time, sometimes it's great to sort of get something that a little more imaginative that will get people talking and really catch their eye. It's the same principle every single magazine has ever used. I mean, that's why you don't walk by the science magazines on the stands and see giant walls of text on National Geographic and Wired and Scientific American. It's all about the visual. So that's my bit.
So my wife has a background in fine art and design as well, which has helped me immeasurably. The first time I ever did a scientific poster back in my undergrad, she took a look at it and just went, "No, like you're not putting that up." That's
her for the rest of us.
Which, I mean, has been invaluable to me, right? Like she's taught me so much about how to present my stuff visually. But that makes me wonder, if you were given the opportunity, and here it is, to tell scientists something about presenting their work visually, what would you say? Like, what are we doing that just drives you nuts, or what do you think we could benefit from?
I think the biggest thing that drives me crazy, and it's maybe too broad a statement, but it's treating the visuals like they're a frill, like they're a secondary, thing that if they have time, they'll throw something in. That's probably the number one thing that bothers me the most. And I recently did a post on Symbiotic calling out different people who are pro-vaccine for doing a really lousy job of constantly showing screaming, crying children getting jabbed with needles. And, whether... Now, my son's vaccinated. I believe in vaccines and the efficacy of vaccines. But whether or not you do, I think there's a logic to being able to say, okay, my message is to be pro-vaccine. Do I want to show somebody crying getting one? It's just stop and think about it for just a minute. No, I don't want to show somebody crying getting a vaccine if I'm trying to promote these. So, and yet, it's constant. And Tara Hale at Double X Science and I were toying with the idea of starting a Tumblr about this. And I worry about the idea of it because I feel like it would consume all of my time. There's so many examples in the media all the time. And but that's the type of thing that bothers me the most, is when it's treated as just sort of an extra and there's no thought given to... and often, the thing is, there's so many amazing artists online who, some of them are going to charge money, some of them aren't going to charge very much, some of them will charge a lot, some of them will do things for free, but most of them would at least answer the question, do you think this picture would look good in my blog post about pro-vaccines? And we could at least give some advice and say, no. Here's why, not a screaming child. But leaving aside the vaccine example, I mean, it goes to anything. It's not enough to, Ernst Haeckel is quite well loved and was amazing, but it's not always, in my opinion, just enough to slap some Ernst Haeckel and some trendy little fonts on top of it and stuff and say, oh, there's my new blog banner. There's I think a lot more thought can go into things, and there's a lot of people out there who know how to do it and can at least give advice, even if you can't afford to pay them. And I think not is credit people. But crediting sources for art is hugely important.
That actually leads into my question, which was copyright. And there's so much... I can't even tell you how many times I've had the same discussion over and over, which is, it was online, so it must be free.
Right.
And so I was wondering, as an artist, how you deal with that, and what will you give away for free, and how do you draw that line, and then also how much of your time gets sucked into defending your ownership?
I'm going to answer those in reverse. How much of my time is how much time I have. In my case, though, because a lot of the stuff that I'm doing are a little more unusual paintings and things, it's been rare. I don't get a lot of those being ripped off. Somebody like Alex Wilde at Compound Eye, he gets ripped off all the time. He takes, like you, Morgan, he takes, tremendously gorgeous shots of insects, so every person doing pesticides out there is slapping them on labels and websites and everything else. And so I don't have. I think it's rougher for photographers. I guess is what I'm trying to say. At the same time, though, it's there's two things. I strongly believe that copyright is in the hands of the creator. I mean, it is, and they have the ultimate right to decide what they want their stuff to, how it should be treated. If it's online, it's not free. You should ask permission. It's really easy to ask permission. We have email now, Twitter messages, all sorts of things. It's so fast and easy to find somebody online. And if you don't know who made the image, the quick tip is open up Google Image or Google Image Search, drag and drop the image from another window, and it usually will pop up and tell you who the original artist was. tineye.com also does the same thing. And I think that being said, I think a lot of artists treat their work far too preciously when they put it online. My work is all under Creative Commons licenses. I used to use the most restrictive one that said anybody could repost it so long as it had attribution, but they weren't allowed to make money from it, and they weren't allowed to alter it in any way. I've recently changed that to that people are allowed to make derivative works of my work. A young woman did a sculpture from one of my paintings. I just thought it was phenomenal. She's totally breaking my Creative Commons copyright, but it was so great. I was just like, I'm going to change how I have this listed on my site because of that. That it's a huge honor to have somebody else sit there and spend all this time and energy and skill on reimagining your own creation. So I think a lot of artists, personally, I think a lot of them should put it out there. Let people share it a little more. As long as they're attributing it back to you, a link, and your name, that's a good thing. And there's that quote. I always forget his name. Tim. I have to look this up. The enemy of artists is not piracy; it's obscurity. And so I think more sharing is a good thing. But I am not a copyright lawyer. So.
Yeah.
Please send your lawsuits.
You said you were going to have something flashing on the screen while I was talking.
So I'm going to switch a little bit away from copyright now. We're kind of all over the map here. But something you said earlier about scientists, and it comes back to the finding and attributing the artists, and not just snagging stuff off the web. But how would you recommend, if a scientist is out there and they want to increase the artistic presence in their papers, blogs, whatever they may be doing, presentations, posters, whatnot, is there a good way for scientists who may not be as social media savvy as others to find a scientific illustrator or somebody willing to work or able to work on their project with them?
I guess, are you looking for resources or just a way that they could approach people?
Either way. I mean, I found you when I needed you because I followed your blog for a while beforehand, but if, say, my advisor needed a scientific artist, he may not be aware of the resources that are out there. So are there any simple places that scientists could look for first, and then how else can we get in touch with science artists?
I think the easiest thing to do is first start asking around your own department. A lot of people have more than one skill set. There's plenty of scientists who are also creating art and are quite adept at illustration, maybe for, it's often quite relaxing. So that's something that a lot of people will take up as a secondary hobby. There's also, I think for resources, the two quickest ways are, well, saying this as the person who made them. There's a few ways. There's a really strong LinkedIn group. I didn't make this one, but Science Artist Communication, I think it's called, on LinkedIn. Bob Nadever runs that, and that's got a huge amount of people on LinkedIn that have joined it. It's relatively active. LinkedIn's not the greatest way to see a portfolio. There's the Science Artist feed that you can find on scienceblogging.org. That's the one that I was mentioning earlier. We've got, I think, about 170 blogs or so on there. And then there's a Google Plus group. if they want to know where to find, called what do we call it? Science. I think it's Science Art Circle Community, something like that. Let me find it here. Anyway, but it's but there's ways to find really quickly like that. Now, if they're not as social media savvy, where do they go? Chances are most universities are going to have an arts department, and then I think the challenge is a lot of people, when they think of scientific illustration, think of incredibly high realism, almost photoreal images. And that was something I was really intimidated about when I was working on the book, like when I was working on the beetle illustrations. When I first started, I turned to my wife and I said, I don't know if I can do these realistic enough. Like, I don't know if I can actually do that. And I sort of was sitting and thinking about it for a little while, and then I was, and he's proving that I didn't.
No, you're proving that you did. I showed it to my brother the other day, and he was amazed that those were drawings.
Oh, are you serious?
Yeah. No, I'm totally serious. I showed the book to my brother when he was down last week or earlier this week. Yeah.
He needs glasses. But,
you're too hard on yourself, man.
Well, I think the thing was I relaxed a bit with them after a while because I realized, like, with the incredible photography that you do, if you wanted photoreal, you wouldn't have asked an illustrator. It's not something that you're not looking for. I mean, some things you need an illustrator. If you want to depict what life is like on one of the exoplanets, or even just what the environment is like on an exoplanet, with our best guess, you can't take a picture. You just can't. So you need an illustrator of some kind. But for something like these insects, I mean, you were sending me incredible photos to work from. So I started to relax a little bit because I realized, well, they don't have to be photoreal, or else you wouldn't have asked me. You just use that. So then I sort of got over it and was able to actually do the work. But I think for resources it can be hard, but I think a lot of it has to come from being willing to see an alternative view of what might be an enticing visual. Somebody like Perrin Ireland, Experiment on Twitter, she does live scribing of lectures and so on. She writes a lot of text, often uses markers, and just gets these fantastic visuals that sort of sum up a talk and how she felt about the relationships between things. And she does little drawings and cartoons and paintings in the corners. And something like that, leading into a blog post or halfway down a really long one, can really create a punchy visual even out of text that I think gives the eye some breathing room from paragraph after paragraph. So I need it. I need pictures in my books.
Following up on that a bit, and this is kind of related to what I asked you before, but I sit in, talk after talk and seminar after seminar, and there's these brilliant, students and faculty who give these talks, and it especially hurts for like PhD students, right? So they spend 4 or 5 years of their life on this research, and they get up to give their seminar, and in 5 minutes they manage to utterly convince you that this is the most boring shit you have ever seen. Right? Despite the fact that it is incredibly cool science.
Yeah.
Right. And part of that is sometimes the way they're presenting it, because they stand up at the talk and they mumble under their shirt. But a lot of it has to do with visual. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on, because scientists sometimes there's a feeling that they don't care, they don't take it seriously, or they think that it should be just a frill, that the ideas are what matter and the visuals are not important, and that this is secondary. So give us your thoughts on that.
Well, I think I understand that. I mean, it's certainly when I sit there and read some of my favorite books that don't have pictures, the power of good prose and good ideas is really stunning. Quite stunning, and can really sweep you away while you're reading. At the same time, though, I mean, as you said, it's the delivery. Not everybody's made to get up and be an incredible speaker and keep everybody hanging on their every word. And sometimes, parts of good research are going to have those dry, boring bits, but you got to get through them because the gold's past that. So I think that's where sometimes having a non-traditional image. One of the bloggers that I think about that's really good at this is Curious. She often in the past has done a great job putting a funny caption underneath a slightly related image, and she just breaks up her text with it. And it's not really necessarily there to completely illustrate her point, or what was that noise? But yeah, I think being willing to break up the text, it's the idea of putting, as much as I hate to say it, an LOL cat on the screen with a funny caption that's related to what you're talking about. The worst kind of presentation, as I hope most people agree, is here's a PowerPoint. I'm going to read everything off of the PowerPoint step by step. People can read while you're talking, so, touch on the points that are on there. Yeah. It's got to be relevant. But at the same time, maybe skip the PowerPoint and put up a visual that's, if you're talking about the ecosystem on, I don't know, what do you guys like, bugs?
No.
No, you don't like
He's
bugs.
an entomologist now, too, so it doesn't really matter.
2 out of 3 hosts agree. Bugs are
Study
awesome.
viruses.
Okay, I've heard of those. So it's one of those things where you can, put up a visual of something that's not, the first thing that leapt to mind when you said viruses was, big picture of a Kleenex box. But you can put up an image just if it's of insects, you can just put up an image of the forest floor or something like that, just to sort of give people something else to we're visual people, or visual creatures, and you want to be able to rest your eyes on something while you're thinking about the words that are.
But we got to go with the cliche question, because you are an artist. What inspires you, Glendon?
No, we didn't have to ask him that.
The love of my family.
What's wrong with you?
They are awesome.
You're not hosting next week.
I don't know. What inspires me? I mean, I've always been interested in the sciences, and when I went to university, a lot of the work I was doing was still sort of, it was a lot murkier back then than it is now. It was a lot less direction, but I was, trying to do some of that weird for the sake of weird, and so I would incorporate things like a tardigrade or, some of the fossils that I found fascinating and try to draw them, and some of them were just really fun to draw. I mean, that was, quite frankly, just from it was fun to do. Sometimes you're drawing a certain texture or capturing detail in it, and trilobites in particular, I mean, they're a bit repetitive, but there's enough interesting features. They don't take very long. So there's a whole sort of pleasure in actually drawing them that's quite neat. But as for what inspires me, I mean, at this point, I think without waxing too philosophical about it, I do think very strongly that science communication is often ignored by the public at large. It's hard to catch people's attention. There are so many good communicators out there, so but we're still not, we have to make more of a dent for all our sakes. I think that the world I want my son to grow up in is a world where people are more scientifically literate than they are now. And so I think we have to use all the tools at our disposal for that.
Cool. Good answer. So,
except for video installation. Never. No. That stuff's a load of crap.
Well, we got to wrap this up because we're hitting the time limit for the episode. But I want to thank you, Glendon, very much for coming on and educating us about the science of art and the art of science. And so people can find you at
GlendonMellow.com. That's the easiest way. If you want to find us on Symbiotic on the Scientific American Blog Network, that's also fantastic. And there, I mean, it's not just myself and my co-bloggers. It's we feature a ton of different artists, and so there's something fascinating there. Several times a week.
Totally. So, thank you very much, Glendon, for coming on Breaking Bio this week. And everybody at home, you can find us at breakingbio.com or follow us on Twitter at breakingbio. I hope you'll join us next week when we'll have a new and exciting guest. But for now, we'll see you later. Thanks.